out of school, he couldn't find his sister anywhere. Thinking that his sister had walked home by herself, he went home alone, but it turned out that Mitzi wasn't home. Mitzi's older sister was home at the time, and she noticed that her younger sister Mitzi hadn't come home yet, which seemed unusual, especially since it was Mitzi's birthday today and she was really looking forward to her birthday party. She waited for a while, hoping that Mitzi would eventually show up. At 4 p.m., her older sister became worried and called their mother to inform her of Mitzi's absence. Their mother quickly contacted Mitzi's school and found out that Mitzi had attended all of her classes that day. The mother then contacted other family members and friends of Mitzi, but no one had seen Mitzi since she left school. Mitzi's relatives became concerned and began searching for her. Family, friends, and neighbors joined in the effort, quickly organizing a large-scale search campaign. Some volunteers walked the streets, while others canvassed the neighborhood, going door to door along the route from Mitzi's home to her school, asking if anyone had seen her. Flyers with information about the girl were also printed and distributed. However, despite these extensive efforts, no one had any news of Mitzi, prompting her parents to contact the 911 emergency services. The police immediately joined the search for Mitzi and local media began reporting on the case the same day Mitzi went missing. The case has attracted widespread attention because similar incidents have occurred in their town before, raising concerns in the community. In fact, for years, an unknown perpetrator or perpetrators have been abducting children in Vallejo. The most recent case, before Mitzi's disappearance, occurred in December 1999. 7-year-old Xana Fairchild, who lived near Mitzi's home, disappeared on her way to school and, despite the efforts of the police and FBI, was never found. When Mitzi disappeared on her way home from school, police immediately suspected a connection to the unsolved case of Xana, who had disappeared under similar circumstances. Although the cases had striking similarities, the lack of leads hampered the investigation. Police revisited the initial list of suspects in Xana's case, but nothing came up. News of Mitzi's disappearance spread quickly, making headlines across the state. Fears of a serial kidnapper on the loose gripped the community, and the possibility of another victim was a terrifying prospect. Mitzi's family members gave numerous interviews in an attempt to keep the case alive and potentially gather more information. Her mother desperately called out to her kidnapper, pleading for her safe return. Police received numerous tips from the public, but unfortunately, none of them led to any breakthroughs in the case. However, everything changed 24 hours after Mitzi went missing. When something unexpected happened. A man contacted the police, telling them that he had discovered bloody rags in a dumpster. Upon examination, experts determined that the rags were actually bed sheets from a Vallejo hotel. This discovery led the police to the hotel to search for evidence and potential clues. Although they could not confirm whether Mitzi had stayed at the hotel, the bed sheets were sent to a lab for analysis, which would take several days to process. In addition to waiting for the test results, the police searched the dumpster, looking for any other clues, but found nothing. The next day, August 12th, the police received another call that changed the course of the case. At approximately 11 a.m., a man reported that he was driving through an industrial area in Santa Clara, when a young girl ran up to his truck, screaming that someone was chasing her. The girl then climbed into the cab of the truck and the driver saw a man running toward them. The girl screamed that he had kidnapped her and wanted to kill her. As soon as she got into the truck, the perpetrator turned around, got back in the car, and drove away. The driver then contacted the police and gave them the girl's name, Mitzi Sanchez. The officers immediately picked her up and took her to the hospital for evaluation. While at the hospital, Mitzi was able to speak to her mother on the phone. Shortly thereafter, her relatives arrived at the hospital and reunited with Mitzi. Meanwhile, the police spoke with the truck driver. He provided the kidnapper's license plate number. because it had driven right in front of his truck. Luckily, if he hadn't been there, the perpetrator might have caught up with the girl. The police ran the license plate and identified the car as belonging to a 39-year-old man named Curtis Dean Anderson. Curtis had a criminal record, including theft, kidnapping, and suspicion of other crimes. As the police focused their efforts on finding the kidnapper, their colleagues were ready to listen to Mitzi's account of what had happened to her. Mitzi explained that on August 10th, she was excited to go home after her last day of school to celebrate her birthday with her family. Instead of waiting for her brother, Mitzi decided to go alone. As she was walking home, she saw a car parked on the side of the road a few hundred yards away and noticed the driver watching her intently in the rearview mirror. Mitzi felt uncomfortable with him but quickly brushed it off. It was daytime, she was on a familiar street, and being young, she did not fully understand the potential danger posed by strangers. As Mitzi approached the car, the man got out and asked her to help him. He said he needed to get a roll of tape from under the car seat and explained that he could not bend down due to a leg injury from falling off his bike. Mitzi hesitated for a moment, initially hesitant, but her instinct to help others, passed down from her parents, eventually made her agree. As she reached into the car to get the tape, the man quickly pushed her into the car, covered her mouth to keep her from screaming, and slammed the door shut. Mitzi tried to scream, but it was too late. The kidnapper had driven off in an unknown direction, and she looked out the window in horror. At one point, they passed Mitzi's house and she saw relatives preparing to celebrate her birthday. Minutes later, the kidnapper pulled into a deserted parking lot. He gave Mitzi new clothes, told her to change, and threw her old clothes in a nearby trash can. He also warned her not to try to escape, claiming that he had a gun and that no one could escape him. Over the next few hours, the man drove Mitzi in an unknown direction. At one point, she asked why he kidnapped her, and he simply replied that he had been kidnapped as a child. As night fell, he parked the car and began covering the windows with some rags. He then restrained Mitzi by tying her legs with padlocks. The kidnapper pulled out a bottle of alcohol and forced Mitzi to take a few sips. Although she initially resisted, Mitzi eventually complied with his demands. The man then took out his camera and took several photos of Mitzi before she got in the car. Fearing for her safety, Mitzi tried to stay awake and keep an eye on the situation. Mitzi thought about escaping as she struggled to stay awake. She caught a glimpse of a police car driving past the parking lot, but it was too far away. Even if Mitzi screamed, the police never heard her. The next day, the kidnapper continued to drive her around town. To hide her from view, he made her sit on the floor of the car and covered her with a blanket. Finally, he stopped the car and got out for a few minutes. During this short time, Mitzi tried to get her feet out of the chains, but unfortunately, it was not possible. She also discovered a nail file and tried to use it to pick the lock, but her efforts were unsuccessful. When the kidnapper returned to the car and drove away, he said he had stopped at her parents' house. The kidnapper pretended to be a concerned citizen and asked to distribute flyers around town. Mitzi was shocked and overwhelmed. She was so close to home but still held captive. Over the course of several hours, the kidnapper stopped several times, getting in and out of the car. When it got dark, he drove to a remote area outside of town and parked. There, he committed a heinous crime, sexually assaulting Mitzi. The traumatic experience left Mitzi in a state of shock, while the kidnapper fell asleep. The next morning, the perpetrator continued driving, stopping occasionally to buy cigarettes and alcohol. At one of these stops, as he returned to the car and leaned in, something fell out of his pocket. He warned Mitzi not to look, but she disobeyed and caught a glimpse of a large set of keys. Mitzi realized that one of these keys was capable of unlocking the lock on her bike chain. Despite her fear of retaliation from her kidnapper, Mitzi mustered up the courage to act. She took out the keys, selected the one that seemed to fit the lock best, and tried to unlock the chain. Surprisingly, it worked. Mitzi was free of the chain. Mitzi struggled to get out through the car window, but exhaustion left her barely able to move. She gathered all her strength, trying to lift herself up and jump out of the car. As she crawled around the car, she saw her captor, who had spotted her immediately. He yelled for her to come back, but Mitzi was determined to escape. Using the last of her strength, she ran in the opposite direction. The captor chased after her, while Mitzi waved desperately and shouted to the passing cars for help. Unfortunately, they all drove past without stopping. Mitzi continued to wave because she knew that if she stopped for even a moment, the captor would catch up and harm her. Finally, she spotted a truck, ran towards it, and jumped in front of it. The driver quickly stopped, and Mitzi climbed into the cab. She was in shock, dehydrated and hungry, but her life was no longer in danger. At the hospital, doctors gave Mitzi the help she needed, and soon her entire family came to be with her. News of her miraculous rescue quickly spread, making headlines across the city. When Mitzi returned home, a large crowd of thousands had gathered on her street, cheering and celebrating her belated birthday. Meanwhile, the police were searching for the kidnapper Curtis Dean Anderson. When they showed his photo to Mitzi's mother, she realized that she had actually seen him twice. The first time was before Mitzi was kidnapped, when Curtis stood on the street and looked toward their house. The second time was the day after Mitzi went missing. Curtis came to her house and asked for flyers related to Mitzi's disappearance. The police continued to search for the suspect, Curtis, until late in the evening. They set up surveillance at all the locations he frequented, and he was finally arrested in a trailer park. He was arrested without incident. Curtis was then taken into custody pending trial. Police began investigating Curtis's possible links to other crimes. During the investigation, they learned that Mitzi was not his first victim. In fact, Curtis told Mitzi himself that she was not the first victim he had harmed and that no one had ever escaped him before. This statement led police to suspect that Curtis had committed crimes before Mitzi was kidnapped, despite his claims that none of his previous victims had survived. Curtis' actions suggested that he had experience committing such brutal crimes. It is worth noting that Curtis had been imprisoned for kidnapping a woman in 1991. He was released in November 1999. It was clear that Curtis intended to kill Mitzi. One specific detail that suggests the murder was planned occurred on the day of her escape. The police knew why Curtis stopped by the industrial park. Because he used to work there at one of the companies, and that day he visited his former co-workers. He asked them to give him a large bag, and the police immediately realized that he intended to use that bag to dump the body in. After Curtis was arrested, Mitzi struggled to recover for a long time. Her anxiety increased when the police suspected Curtis of being involved in Xana's kidnapping. Although Mitzi was relieved to be safe, she was still worried about the condition of her friend Xana Fairchild, 7, who had been missing for more than 8 months without any updates on her condition. Desperate to help find Xana, Mitzi joined a search effort, but unfortunately, no new leads were discovered. This continued until January 2001, when a human skull was found in the mountains near the city of Santa Cruz. Forensic analysis confirmed that the skull was that of Xana, and she was officially declared dead. This news devastated Mitzi. When the trial began in April 2001, Mitzi was required to testify about her experiences in front of a crowded courtroom. During her testimony, she had to provide every detail of what Curtis had done to her. Despite Curtis being present in the courtroom, Mitzi was still able to tell her story courageously. As a result, Curtis was sentenced to 251 years in prison, but his story did not end there. While in prison, detectives frequently questioned Curtis about his possible involvement in other crimes. A breakthrough came when an inmate reported that Curtis had confided in him about the kidnapping and murder of 8 girls. Although the inmate cooperated with police, sharing details of Curtis's story, he did not reveal all of his secrets. He did not deny the information he had confided in him, but instead attempted to negotiate benefits in exchange for speaking with police. Curtis eventually admitted to the murders of Xana Fairchild and at least 13 other girls and women. It was not until 2005 that he confessed fully to Xana's murder, for which he received an additional 50-year sentence. Midsee's struggles did not stop after Curtis's trial. She faced a new challenge when she returned to school just weeks after her rescue. Her classmates bullied and taunted her, calling her the kidnapped girl and saying that she should have died instead of being saved. These cruel comments made her school years a burden, and eventually, she could no longer bear the pressure. Midsee became increasingly dependent on alcohol to cope with the stress. And she felt desperate to return to normal life. However, her life took a drastic turn after a serious car accident at a party, in which she broke her neck and arm. She was in a coma for 2 weeks. When she woke up, doctors informed her that she was pregnant and would give birth to a baby girl. This news turned her life upside down, and Midsee found the strength to change her life for the better. Curtis died of illness in 2007,